The question today is if rebels are made, are they born, and who's really right for a startup environment? Can you even select someone who's right for a startup environment? Or do you have to build an environment that attracts and retains the right people? The conversation has been happening for a long time about rebels being made or born. And in most people's minds, people are born rebellious. And if you have kids, maybe a kid comes to mind that you feel was a rebel when they were born. But ultimately, I think the answer really lies in the fact that both are probably true, that people can migrate in that direction or they can be born that way. Taking a look at high growth companies, people think that they're really sexy and exciting. And that's true to some degree, but the reality is they're a ton of work. And the other thing that comes up all the time is, are these people that are really ready to run and jump off the cliff? Are those the type of people that you want, or is it something different? When you think about yourself and you think about the context of being in a startup, you really have to take a step back and decide what drives you and what excites you. And not just something that's gonna get you up in the morning, but something that has you jump out of bed. And in the startup world, that's really a whole lot of uncertainty and a whole lot of work, working at a very fast pace. And for most people, that's not a great fit, especially if you're having to switch every single second between a strategic and a tactical focus. And the ability to do that not only comes from the person, but the environment that you create within the organization. For myself personally, that started a long time ago. I had my first job or gig when I was like 8 years old, running around a convention, getting food for vendors that couldn't leave their table. And at the end of the day, I made more money than my parents did selling things at the convention, doing something that was a need. So for me personally, this was something that was really intrinsic to how I started figuring things out at a very young age. Another example I can give you is my mentor and old boss, Matt Likens. He's a completely different story. He's the guy that started out in corporate America in big companies like Johnson & Johnson, and he had an experience that created a situation where he made the decision he wanted to make a difference. A boss one time told him that he was lucky to work there, and that made him believe that in actuality he was providing more value to the company than the company was providing to him. For yourself, when you think about what drives you and your history, are you the type of person that change is incredibly scary? Are you a risk-tolerant person? Or ultimately, are you a person that looks at the risk that's existing, weighs the options, tiptoes up to the cliff, and then jumps off? Statistically, the most successful entrepreneurs are that last person that I described. Most people, again, think that they're the people running with reckless abandon towards the edge of the cliff, and that's not really true. In the book, The Originals, there's a lot of data and information about what makes an entrepreneur, and it's ultimately contrary to what most people think. Again, most people believe that those are the people that are highly risk tolerant or are the very first people to think about a concept. But those organizations and people that are second to market tend to be more entrepreneurial in nature and have far more success than those people that think of an idea that's incredibly original and run with that idea without really any business orientation on those facts. You might be wondering, what then is the silver bullet to figure out who's right for a startup? And a lot of organizations have tried to figure that out, Google being one of them. They spent millions of dollars trying to figure out who's exactly right and how to select the right people for that environment. And what they found out is they couldn't really figure it out, and they had to create an environment that attracted and retained the right people versus trying to select them. Once you attract the right mindset, the next thing that you need to do is look at how to ground an organization. And the best way to do that is to look at core values and purpose. Ultimately, finding a purpose and having core values creates a floor. And when they have that ground and that basis, all of the shifting and changing of priorities in business, they can handle because you have a floor built for them. Without that floor, all of the change that happens in a startup can even upset the most risk-tolerant person. Another element is having goals that are a common denominator across the whole organization. One example of that in the book Good to Great is creating a BHAG, or a big, hairy, audacious goal. It's more than a stretch. It's a big stretch for most organizations. So for example, if you're at $1 million in revenue, $100 million in revenue is a BHAG. And maybe you never quite reach that, but ultimately everybody's rowing in the same direction to get there. The other thing about startups is you have to hire not just for personality type, people that can run on a hamster wheel at 100 miles an hour, drink coffee, and do work all at the same time, but the other thing you need is generalists, because there's no job description in a startup. There's no such thing as a finite set of roles that everyone does every single day. That changes and shifts so dramatically, not just week to week or month to month or based on the client, but really on a daily basis. Starting with the basis of core values and moving up to authentic leadership, the other thing that's really critical is real-time feedback to everyone within the organization. That's not the same as micromanaging someone. What it is coaching someone to be their best every single day. Think about coaching a sports team as an example. Would you wait until the end of the game to give players positive feedback or constructive criticism about what's going on in the game? The answer is probably no. And in the same way, in a high-moving startup organization, giving real-time feedback during a meeting, after a meeting, is really critical to get people to understand where they need to improve, but also where their strengths lie. I'm not a big believer in rules. Lots of rules are not only not necessary, but they actually create an environment where you do not allow people to have the latitude to be creative and original. And ultimately in a startup company, you need everyone to be original about what they're thinking about to get to where you need to go. I'll leave you with this. Rules don't make business, people make business. Connection with those people in an authentic way and finding true connection throughout an organization built on a grounding of core values is ultimately what creates great business. And in an organization that's 1,000 or 2,000 people, those things are really important. But in a startup organization, those things are absolutely critical. You need to have trust and autonomy, and you can't have those things without real connection between human beings and creating an environment where people feel inspired and motivated every single day to drive towards a goal that you've created out of a BHAG. So those elements are critical regardless of your business size, but if you're looking at a startup organization, just remember it's all about the people and it's a lot of hard work. At the end of the day, building a startup is really hard, but it's a lot of fun. And you build new ideas and concepts that people have never even thought of. And that is what drives me.